The left uses climate change as their untouchable permission to to force through their agenda. It's a nice permission slip to do that, and saving the planet on such a grand, important scale. I mean, who in their right mind wants to kill the planet and all the cute little animals? When they keep it in general terms, people tend to agree that we should be taking action to avoid climate disaster. But then when you're like, okay, so what does that really mean? Apparently, people don't want to take as much action as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris say we must. There's a new study that was released last month that found that among registered voters, 15% said, I'd be willing to spend up to $10 of my own money to fight climate change. Ooh, $10. Now, 35% said, $10, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't be willing to even spend $1 of my own money on climate change. Well, too bad for that half of the country, because President Biden wants you to use a little bit more of your money on the environment. This is why it's vital the Democrats keep their green policies away from the voting booth, because nobody wants anything to do with it. And they can't have an honest debate about green policies because that will never allow them the sweeping Marxist changes that they crave. Instead, they rely on policy edicts from the administrative state. Oh, my gosh. And the presidential executive orders. I mean, Woodrow Wilson is looking down, just smiling and throwing a party. Oh, and the new public-private partnership, which the World Economic Forum is very passionate about. So we're starting to see things like what just happened recently at Exxon, where the new activist investment firm called Engine Number One just won 3 seats on Exxon's board. Engine Number One has been targeting Exxon to pressure the company to cut its carbon emissions. Carbon emission, isn't that what they make? I mean, that everything they do is what? Yes, they need to shift away from that old business of fossil fuels. I mean, it's kind of like, we got to get Ronald McDonald to shift away from some of that fast food. You know what I'm saying? The Wall Street Journal called it, quote, a watershed moment in the effort seeking more environmental, social, and governance modifications at the nation's biggest companies. Engine Number One, the campaign, was supported by BlackRock. The new George Soros, which you may recall is the largest firm in the world with almost $8 trillion under management. Oh, by the way, they also are advising the president on economic policy. Oh, and the Treasury. They're everywhere. Engine Number One hired 2 former BlackRock executives to work on its Exxon board campaign. BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink, is one of the board of trustees in the World Economic Forum. That's great. BlackRock and the World Economic Forum, and now Exxon. Fink is also in the running to be Biden's new Treasury Secretary, but he decided, I love women so much, I'll stay here. Over the last year, Fink has transformed BlackRock into an ESG cultural center. Fink talks ESG nonstop at company town halls, seminars on ESG investing. It seems to take place every single week. An executive named Brian Deese was promoted to push money managers to consider ESGs in all of their investment decisions. Well, guess where Brian Deese is now? Come on, guess. He's the director of the National Economic Council at the White House. Larry Fink realizes there's a lot of money to be made in creating new investment funds. And all of these funds would be dedicated to ESG. He figures if BlackRock can control ESG investments, ensuring that companies like Exxon have ESG board members, well, then all they need is the government to step up and require companies to comply with ESG components. Isn't this perfect? Wow. When the world comes together, what could be done? Turns out the SEC is already working on those plans right now. Huh. In March, the SEC created a climate and ESG task force within its enforcement division. According to the SEC, this task force will develop initiatives to proactively identify ESG-related misconduct. Wow. Later this year, the SEC is set to establish the rules that require companies to disclose the risks they face from climate change and the policies to curb their own emissions. The thing about attacking companies like Exxon, Chevron, for being in the oil business, combined with Biden's executive orders shutting down oil exploration and pipelines, is that it completely denies reality. The fact is that even Americans and Europeans will have to continue using fossil fuels for a very long time out of necessity. I know. I'm on my Standing Rock Ranch, which is 100% self-efficient. I don't have a pipeline, a wire, or anything else, so I have to create all of my own energy. Well, we started 10 years ago, and the first system cost me about $100,000 to put in. Had never worked. We were running diesel generators to be able to generate power. So we tried again. We did another system, more experts. It didn't work. So we ran that diesel generator, and then we thought, I'd like to be a little more green. So we put some natural gas in, or propane gas, to be able to run some of those generators. Well, now I have 3 Cummins engines and I think 5 giant tanks of propane, just in case something goes down. And if that system goes down, I have 2 generators that run just on diesel. Well, I've also spent about $250,000 in the last 10 years on top of the first initial 6 figures to replace all of that in 10-year period. And with only about $350,000, you can be energy independent. That's right. Last summer, I bought 2 6,000-pound batteries. Oh, yes, they were $15,000. But the good news is they'll last a whole 5 to 8 years. Isn't that fantastic? Oh, and some of the solar panels I put up 10 years ago, yeah, they all need to be replaced because they're not efficient enough now. So everybody can live green. Oh, I didn't tell you about the wind turbines I also have on the hill. This is what it actually takes to be green. All of my backups, and I need lots of backups, all of my backups are still run on either propane or diesel. The left thinks that it's saving our planet by attacking our fossil fuel production. But what they're actually doing is bankrupting people and handing long-term advantage over to Russia and OPEC nations. Russia can read the woke tea leaves, and they I like what I see, yes. A Russian executive from the oil company Gazprom, the Russian gas company that I'm sure is very woke. He said recently, quote, "It looks like the West will have to rely on what it calls hostile regimes for supply." Oh, yes, we will. Thank you, Joe Biden. Russia energy giant Rosneft is building a massive new oil terminal in the Arctic that by 2030 is projected to deliver 100 million tons of oil per year. The project will require 400,000 workers. Boy, I hope the Russians, they do care about the Arctic Circle, right? They're going to take care of it with those 400,000 people, right? Rosneft says that it will build 15 entirely new towns to accommodate the Arctic workforce. Russia is laughing all the way to the bank, and so will BlackRock. Yeah, they're not dummies. We're we're so green. We want to make sure ESG, especially the E and the S and the G are important, but E, the energy part, the environment part, boy, I tell you, they see it as a gold mine in the U.S. The top 2 investments in BlackRock's emerging European fund are Russian oil companies and energy companies. Yeah. Luck Oil and Gazprom. So whether the green investment thing pans out at home or the world has to try, go over to Russia or OPEC for its oil, it's win-win really for BlackRock. And there you will be. You're already paying the highest price at the pump that you've paid in the last 7 years. And sweetheart, we're just at the beginning. We will pay the price just like we do whenever Democrat elites, progressive elites, begin to fix things.